Our little tagline that we've used for years now is that film don't lie is where the video meets the data. We show you the video all the time. We talk about the data. We're going to show you some data from the NFL Combine in this. Brent Rollins, Dayne Young here from UGAsports.com. Brent, I know the Combine is something that piques your interest specifically every year, just the draft season in general. But when we start looking at some of these numbers that we're going to see, the performance of Georgia players in the NFL Combine, just as an overall thing, what do you look for from players from this particular event? And in the future, we'll be having the same discussion about Pro Day.
Yeah, it's just, what are the outliers? Like, do you hit sort of kind of like, hey, are you 48 inches and you can ride the ride at a certain theme park? Like, do you hit certain benchmarks and not be behind that? Like, for example, if you're running the 40 and you're a running back, are you at least 4.6, 4.65 or faster? If you're receiver, are you certain number faster? Do you have certain, if you're an edge guy, what's your 3-cone, speed, things like that. It's just more of it's just, okay, I can check that box that there isn't something that I maybe need to rewatch now the tape. Because, like, for example, years back, you think back to Elijah Holyfield. And then when he ran the 40 and you're like, oh, like, I mean, okay, we need to go back and look. And it went from, hey, this guy's going to be middle of the round pick to, no, he doesn't get drafted because of that. So even Kendrick last year, Darren Kendrick, does all that stuff. And you think, oh, he's not a speed guy. We've seen that on tape. And then he runs 4.7 something. And you're like, ooh, like, and that's what caused him to get drafted, in the 7th round, I think, by the Rams. So it's more of looking at the outliers.
The reverse is true, that like a Chris Conley can go to the Combine and people say, oh, I didn't see any of that in college. And then now it's turned into a 10-year NFL career for him.
And even one from this past weekend where it's just like, I knew there was explosion there in speed, but maybe not that level of speed.
Yeah, especially coming off of injury. Let's start it this way. Just let's pick 3 things from each of us that just caught our attention or maybe surprise us, or things of note from Georgia players for the Combine. We'll kind of do this back and forth. I'll give you my number 3 first, and you just kind of teased it a little bit, but I think it's that Nolan Smith does it all. And like, great player at Georgia, don't get me wrong. I found him to be more of like a hype guy at Georgia and not like a dominant defender. He was a really good player, but those numbers say, oh, he's about to be like a cornerstone player in somebody's defense. And I think that we wouldn't have said that, a year ago?
No, I think it's just the explosion. Like, you see the explosion in how he handles the run and how he takes on blocks, but we never really truly got to see it. Like, we did the plays of the highest graded plays, and I remember you said, hey, this is one I didn't really remember because it was a Nolan pass rush against Kent State.
Yeah.
Where he was legit turned loose on the edge, go be speed guy there. We just don't see it a lot. And I think a lot of that is his issues, much like Trayvon a year ago, where Georgia doesn't turn guys loose and just give them freedom on the edge. And their numbers, consequently, aren't always going to be eye-popping to where it's like, ooh, that guy's definitely a double-digit sack guy, first top 15 pick. But then you see the measurables, and it completely changes kind of that narrative in a way.
We'll show you those specifics. Your number 3 thing that stood out.
How freaky fast was the 21 defense, in particularly the front 7. Because you think about, so Nolan just went, when we look at the number, but we know it was 4.39. Jordan Davis was the fastest ever at 341 pounds, 4.78. Devontae Wyatt, 4.77. Quay, 4.52. Trayvon, 4.51. Tyndall, 4.47. I mean, and even Robert Beal, 4.48. Like, that was sort of another one where it's like, ooh, okay, now we need to re-examine the tape. But that was the thing for me, is just how freaky fast was that 21 defense.
You kind of project ahead too and say, but Michael Williams is going to run a pretty good 40 in a couple of years.
Yes.
Or I think Marvin Jones Jr. has the potential to run a pretty fast 40 in a couple of years.
Very much so.
Will they have the tape and production to go along with it? Because a great workout's one thing, but we see a lot of players that don't do as good at this, and they're really good football players, and vice versa. Number 2 thing that stood out to me, watching the national media realize that Stetson Bennett is a really good football player. Because it's obvious that, like, people that just read Twitter, and the people that have watched Georgia to the extent that we have, that like we're used to seeing him throw the deep ball very accurately, especially within the last year and a half. Like he's grown into a great player with good mechanics, and I think that surprised people. It shouldn't have.
No, and what's interesting is that was actually also on my list. We didn't compare notes.
We
but
did.
I wrote Stetson ripping it.
Yeah,
like the velocity. You know, he obviously had the fresh, sort of somewhat fresh fade, so you knew he was kind of dialed in in a different way for the combine. But the deep balls.
I think Roddy, when he came up to the podium, I think he said, "Uh-oh, Staquavius."
Yes,
I think Roddy said that into a microphone, which just made me laugh.
And that's hilarious. And but you know, that was his mantra that was a thing this year. It became a thing and a sort of persona or his, hey, I'm putting on the cape, I'm Superman now kind of deal. But the 59 miles an hour with the velocity was only, same as Levis.
Which on my brand, I did do my Twitter joke that 59 miles an hour, only 10 more to go. And he can get there.
True. Very true. But yeah, I wrote that same thing down as well. Stetson.
Gronk would come out of retirement for that, just to catch that football.
And what's interesting, though, is I think if he were 22, it would be, hey, this guy's a third-round pick or late second-round, third-round pick, and there would be no questions, and everybody would just feel that way, especially if he was like a 3-star coming out of high school, like everybody would just be on that train versus, hey, he's been around the block, his age is a little up there, wasn't a recruit. Those things just kind of, unfortunately, are there. It's just perception versus actual reality. And we've shown actual reality where he's the deep ball, velocity on stuff. It's like you said, he ripped it.
Or if he was 6'3", and I get Bryce Young's short, I understand that. But what I'm saying is, Bryce Young has a Heisman Trophy and has more crazy dynamic throws on tape than Stetson does. I'm not trying to say that the height is something that should be held against him, but when the other things aren't there reputation-wise, regardless of what tape says, you kind of have to overcome some of that. Levis actually has the opposite going on. You put on Levis's tape and you're like, I see all the ability, but I see a ton of mistakes.
Yes, I agree, and we'll get to that conversation later.
Same with Richardson. We'll hold that too.
The fun
Was that your number one? The Stetson deal?
It was the next one. No, it was actually the next one that I had.
So then I will go to my final one, which is also national media perception. Watching the national media realize that Darnell Washington big.
He is. My go-to for this has always, and we've said it on the videos, he's a different level of human being.
Yeah,
he just is. And I thought I saw the picture posted this evening. It was Ian Rappaport or somebody. Him and the guy that was listed at 6'7", Darnell was listed at like 6'6.5", and Darnell still looked taller, both with shoes and without shoes, than that guy. Like, it's like, okay, are we doing here?
Well, so the combine's interesting though, because pound for pound, there are much better athletes than Darnell Washington. Like you see his vertical jump, you see some of these other things. Like he doesn't get percentage based off of his body like some other people do. It does not matter because like he starts at the level that he is. And so I think any team that passes on him should be required to go up to him and tell him that they're doing so, just so they can rethink that dilemma. I think that he's a no doubt first round pick. If I'm any NFL team, I think you get better immediately. If I have to pick a favorite NFL team, and this is going to upset some of our Falcons fans, crossover viewers, but like if I had to pick a favorite NFL franchise, it's the Saints because I've fallen in love with the city of New Orleans because of the amazing food down there over the last 2 years. Anywho, a team like New Orleans that needs to get out of cap hell, probably tank for a couple of years and just reset, Darnell would be the perfect person to add to that team because you stabilize, you get a position that's probably not going to require a ton of money in future years, and you can just begin to kind of turn the page without being horrendous.
The interesting thing when we talk about him, and we'll talk about this later when we do our sort of individual draft profiles, but we look at some tape as well, but last year, 6'7", 260-plus pound tight end that ran 4.61 in the 40, Jelani Woods was drafted in the 72nd, 73rd overall by the Colts. So because of the position, but his profile obviously didn't have what Darnell's profile has from a blocking perspective. And we've said this all along. If Darnell wanted to be a left tackle, he could go be a first-round left tackle right now. So, I think it's one of those where he is that sort of different level of human being, though.
And your final observation?
Broderick Jones made a lot of money because UGA kind of iffy on their listings a little bit. You've always seen him listed. I thought he was like kind of out of high school, 6'6". Like I remember always seeing him listed as 6'6", and then UGA has always listed him at 6'4". And when you're 6'4" and you're a tackle, then you start getting those questions of, are you really a guard at the NFL level?
Like Jamari Sawyer, that's what you get.
All that stuff. But then he measures 6'5.5", basically. And you're like, so to me, you're like, okay, and you look at, and Daniel Jeremiah did his player comp with Ike Ekwonu that went in the top 10 last year to Carolina. Like Broderick, to me, now puts himself squarely in that offensive tackle 1 and potentially in the top 10 realm. And when you look at sort of who made the most money, like going from pick 18 to pick 8, potentially, that's a ton of money. Like versus, hey, I'm a 5th-round pick versus now I'm a 3rd-round pick. Not a lot of money. 18 to 8, 20 to 8, 22 to 8 to 6, huge amount of money.
I would say, and we'll use this as our transition into actually looking at the numbers that each of the players put up. But I would say that if you had to do kind of a stock up, stock down of Georgia players, Broderick Jones, Darnell Washington, I think made ththemselves some money. Darnell with that one-handed catch in particular, because that's a skill set he didn't.
And the gauntlet himself, how he handled the gauntlet, catching them.
Stetson Bennett, I think, probably stabilized from what the narrative has been since the title game. In terms of and Nolan Smith, obviously. Gosh, there's 4 guys right there. In terms of losing, you have to think Jalen Carter probably is not in the first overall pick discussion anymore. And maybe he wasn't anyway. He's not dropping out of the top 10.
I don't think he's dropping out of the top 5.
Right. And so I'm just saying there's potential that like this week cost him a little bit, although considering the circumstances, he handled it about as well as you could ask someone to.
And I think the key is finality. Like, is it lingering? Is there ongoing? Is there other possibilities? Or is it final, done, do some community service, pay some fines? Like, if it's done, then much like the stock market, once you have certainty, all right, then you go sort of in a different way. When there's uncertainty is when you get the ebbs and flows and maybe dropping.
I thought Kenny McIntosh's 40 time may have cost him a little bit, although it's tough to say with running backs. I know he's not the speedster burner type, but I mean, there are a lot of defensive ends that ran faster than that.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those where, much like we talked about earlier, at least he wasn't 4.68, 4.69. It was 4.60, 4.62, something like that.
Yeah,
like, that's about where he was going to be. We knew he wasn't a take it to the house back. But what his skill set is I think he definitively puts himself in that 4th, 5th round area. Like,
yeah, it's kind of the opposite of like when you see Jahmyr Gibbs put up the 40 he did, you're like, oh, okay, yes, that's a 1st round running back, maybe.
And if Kenny was 4.49, like much like Cook, James Cook last year, James Cook went 4.44 or 4.45 or something like that. Okay, now he gets picked 58th in the 2nd round. If Kenny would have been in the 4.5s or lower 4.5s, now it's maybe early 3rd round, middle 3rd round versus 4th, 5th round.
Let's put up these numbers here from the 40 time from
one bonus take
NFL.com.
One bonus sort of big picture thing. Two quick ones. One, much like last year, the combine was again a Georgia infomercial marketing campaign. And then 2, 5 stars are 5 stars for a reason. When you see
Keely and Nolan right here,
Keely, Nolan, Darnell, like all these guys that were 5-star recruits and then test out the wazoo, they were 5 stars for a reason.
The first thing that I always think is important with 40 times, and yes, positions can vary on this, but like in the natural flow of a game, and I think you see this when you see a Kenny McIntosh run a 4.62 here, but we've also seen him break away from fast people. In the course of a game, 0.3 of a second, not always the most meaningful thing in football. Like, this shows that you're a better athlete or that you can run at a higher speed in that burst. But like, I've seen Christopher Smith look really fast on a football field, and he ran a 4.62 here. So I don't want to turn this into like the football speed versus working out in the underwear Olympic speed. But what I'm saying is, I don't see any here that are like super alarming. I get it that running backs, the scat back types, tend to be a little faster, but Kenny McIntosh is more of a receiver anyway. Mm-hmm. I think having this many Georgia players under 4.7 at a variety of positions, that speaks to the program.
Yes, and strength and conditioning, development, all that. Now, what's interesting with Ringo is, like, I think he tested like 4.35 at the Rivals Challenge as a senior in high school, and I thought, oh, is he going to get into the like lower 4.3s? I thought he might be like 4.32, and where you really sort of, but still, that's insanely fast for somebody who's almost 210 pounds. What Nolan did was obviously a whole different animal. Like, he completely, I think he was somebody who I thought would be a perfect Philadelphia Eagle with their second first-round pick at 31.
Now.
He won't be there at 31, I don't think. I think he's not getting out of the teens, likely, to me. But the biggest sort of eye-opener on this one was Beal, where it's like, okay, I mean, this is a guy who technically led the team in sacks a season ago, or in 2021. And it's like, okay, different level athlete, Georgia's system, they don't really let these edge guys loose. To me, he went from someone who wasn't going to be drafted, I don't think he would have been drafted, to now potentially being a 5th, 6th round pick, or drafted at some point now. And that's a big deal for him.
Yeah. And that's another testament to staying in Georgia's program and working out.
Who do you think Stetson's 40, by the way? Did you he basically slowed up at the end? Like, I was watching it. I'm like, what are you? Oh my goodness gracious. How are you not going through the line?
Do we think that Arian Smith would run the fastest 40 of current Georgia players? Now, he's the track guy, so that's my brain goes there.
I would say yes. I mean, but there's also CJ Smith that's, the true freshman that was there, and it's 40 versus 100 meters, or versus the versus the true track type stuff. I think you're right. I think he's probably going to be in the like 4.33, 4. He'll be a step faster than Keeley.
Because what piques my interest is there someone at Georgia? Well, Lad piques my interest in just a variety of ways. Let me count them. Is there a guy at Georgia that can flirt with a 4.2 something?
Arian would probably be the only one that you would think that is in that realm. I'd love to know what Matthew Bowling runs the 40 in.
The world may never know.
Yeah.
Let's get to 10-yard split times here. Again, hey, Nolan Smith at the top. And shout out to Kyrus Jackson here too, because that's pretty darn quick there. And
this one and the shuttle, like, these are two for certain positions where you're like, okay, I really want to see what these times are, because you think about how often do you actually run 40 yards on a play. It's kind of rare. It's more how quick and how explosive and fast are you in short spaces. Top end, yes, we want to see what the top end is, but also how quick and how explosive are you in these short, and like Darnell being right there near these guys, Stetson too, like those are impressive.
But when you're talking, I think this is a fun spectrum here, right? Because this kind of matches what our eyes see, in the sense that Nolan Smith in this drill is a 1.52, and a 10th in this drill is a very large percentage difference. And so Robert Beal being a 10th behind that, I think when you watch them on tape, you see Nolan Smith
one's
covers
more explosive than
space.
The other.
Yes, exactly.
Quickly.
Yeah.
More quicks, more get off.
Like, that's a greater difference percentage-wise in those times than the 40 was between those two. And so Robert Beal can sustain speed for a longer period, but he's just not quite as twitchy as Nolan Smith. And man, I don't even know how you teach this piece of it. I think some of this is just God-given.
Training.
Yeah, I mean,
training.
You can, yeah.
It's these guys train once they start and they stop. They train the start. Can you start off the blocks and can you not slip? Can you be explosive? Get to your top end speed as quick as you possibly can.
This right here is why Kenny McIntosh will be drafted middle rounds, is because that's impressive for someone that had the 40 time that he did. Let's look at verticals here. Nolan, hello.
I mean, when you think
that's
about
blocking kicks,
what he did, he was only bested by Scene last year. So Scene was 4.37 and Tyndall was 42 in the vertical. That's it in terms of these explosive, those two explosive type measures. There's a reason he was one of the top recruits in the nation. And, somewhat on the bright side for him, upper body injury, he's been working on explosion and legs and training in that realm for a while, and it paid off. The next two are kind of one I was a little shocked to see side by side with the exact same vert. But
Keely Ringo and Stetson Bennett both at 33.5. Yeah. And look, it is funny that Stetson Bennett can jump higher, vertical jump. No, I'm not dunking basketballs here because they're at different planes, but his vertical jump is higher than Darnell Washington. That is just funny. And it'll always be funny and forever be funny. If I'm Stetson Bennett, I'm texting Darnell Washington once a day for the remainder of my life, just with this graphic.
Hey, big fella.
Right here. Yeah.
And then he'd be like, yeah, I just dunk on you standing still.
He would. I mean, can you imagine Stetson Bennett trying to guard Darnell Washington?
I can't imagine anyone trying to guard him in basketball.
Just
that would not be fun.
Backing him down. He'd just foul out 6 plays and go sit on the bench and have a good day. Yeah, vertical jump. I don't know how much this is like super relevant in football. It tends to matter more for the receivers and corners, but I do think Nolan Smith here probably just earned himself a spot on some special teams for blocking kicks.
Oh, yeah. And it's just it's do you hit sort of benchmarks for explosion?
Yeah. I mean, it's as much data comes in, it's still, can you run fast? Can you jump high? And Nolan Smith, as we see with the broad jump, he can jump high and he can jump far. Yeah. Tops at Georgia. I thought Kyrus Jackson, good showing here with the 10.6.
I'm interested to see if he gets drafted because I tend to think he won't. But there might be somebody who says, all right, hey, this guy can win in the slot, physical, be a special teams player, return kicks potentially, and, drafts that in the 6th or 7th round. So that to me will be interesting to see.
He's one of those that if it's borderline, I have a feeling the Georgia coaches and Kirby are going to push hard, the team leader stuff and all that and special teams. All the intangibles that maybe you can sneak a starter on special teams late in the 7th round, which that does matter. I mean, in roster management.
And by the way, 1,000,000%. The answer to the question, does Kirby Smart make sure that every single player knows the minimum salary, veteran minimum salary because of special teams? Yes. Yeah. Every single player on that roster knows what the special teams salary, just by being on the team through special teams, what the minimum is.
I think Kyrus Jackson's path, and they're different positions, different sides of the ball, very similar to Malik Herring, to where you're probably going to have to be back end of a roster, maybe even down on the scout team for a year or two. But if you keep at it, like Malik Herring was on the Chiefs roster this year, like that ring is coming, and so I could see Kyrus Jackson. Too. Yeah, he gets one too. So there's your broad jump there, Nolan Smith.
The shuttle's the next one to sort of really
2 players for Georgia.
Darnell because that, like Darnell himself, like tweeted something about being able to change directions, and then he said I could change directions too. Yikes! So and his third, it says short shuttle. Third, hard to say that fast. Third best of anyone at the combine this year. Not including the running backs that went today. And then Stetson's was faster than all but 4 of the wide receivers. And this is one where we've seen this. You made a video to Great Kobe Calais music to it of him just breaking ankles all season long. But the national folk and national people that watch Georgia and watch Stetson haven't necessarily seen a whole lot of that unless they've seen a highlight package.
Yeah. Which they could go to my Twitter. It's right there.
Yes, it is there.
We don't really care about the bench press. Darnell Washington 21 reps. Christopher Smith at 15. That is the.
I feel like I could do 15 right now, Chris Smith. Come on now. All right.
Okay.
It'd be close. I don't know.
Sneaks up on you.
225. I mean, I about a month ago I could.
I'm not as confident as you are, but you probably work out a little harder than I do. All right, I know you had some topics you want to touch on, so I'm going to hand you the keys as the producer role, and we'll hit these. And I guess it's important to mention, now that you've made it 26 minutes with us, as we go through this draft process, Film Don't Lie may turn into a bit more of a talk show podcast deal. We'll sprinkle in some film of players and things that NFL teams are looking at as we see fit. But really until the draft now, we're just kind of monitoring what's happening and what teams are looking for. And we get to bring back my favorite game of this player feels like a. Yeah.
I've got a couple already in mind.
I thought Nolan Smith felt like he should be playing for the Washington football team. I think that would kind of be a fit for them.
Also, to me, feels like a Patriot in the middle of the first round.
Oh, Belichick.
Loves him some Georgia boys.
Oh, Belichick. Can he help himself?
He sees Mike Vrabel 2. He sees a more athletic Mike Vrabel and Teddy, that kind of player that he can move all around and do things with.
Kenny McIntosh feels like a Arizona Cardinal.
So
keys are yours. I am now the analyst
for me, and we'll get to. I'm very curious as your opinion on this. After this weekend, and I thought it going in. I've thought it since all of this started. And especially since Stroud had the game he did against Georgia. I think the first 6 picks are now set in stone. Just the only thing that is the order. I think it's the 4 QBs, Jalen Carter, and Will Anderson. Whatever the sort of the order is, the only one that could sort of be a wrinkle in that is Seattle at 5. I think they're at 5th. They're 5th. Detroit's 6th. But I still think the 4 QBs are going in the top 6 picks. What do you think?
I'm going to the first thing I'm trying to do is poke a hole in it and think who would be the person to sneak in there, right?
And that's the key for me.
Spots. Yeah.
In this draft, I don't think they're if they always tiers who has a first round grade. And I think this draft is one where player at 10 versus player at 30, the gap is not great. And there's just a line of delineation where I think the guy you pick at 29, like Darnell, if you pick Darnell at 29 versus, you pick the Van Ness guy from Iowa at 11, I don't, from impact standpoint, positionally, yes, positional value is going to come into play there. But I don't think from a just how good is the player perspective, I don't know that it's that big of a difference.
All right, I'll put it this way. If teams trade around a lot in those first 6 picks, if the teams that really want to get quarterbacks move up there and take them, I'm going to agree with you. If it's more quiet, then
yes,
I'm not going to agree with that because I could see one of the offensive linemen being taken or the edge rusher from Texas Tech if he is up there and someone's just in love with him. The difference is I don't see a Sauce Gardner in this draft of a corner that you take super high.
Yes.
There are plenty of good corners.
There's a lot of great corners. And
I think Miles Murphy's a good player. I don't think he's a top 6 pick.
No.
So that's kind of where we stand.
I think that's a great counterpoint. If there is no trade, if it's status quo, because I think if it's status quo, it's Will Anderson or Jalen 1, QB 2.
And I'm saying beyond the Bears just moving back. Like
Yeah.
it's got to be more than just that. It's got to be teams jumping up there to get some of those guys.
And-
All that said, if it's 4 out of 6 that are quarterbacks in that top, historically that tells you half of them are not going to be that great, and one may not be in the league for a while.
So I did some research a little bit. So I look back from 2004 to current, and there's at least 80% of those, over 80%. I think there's so in 2022, last year with Kenny Pickett, in 13 with EJ Manuel. Those are the only two where only one quarterback went in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Every other time, there's at least two, including like 08 with Flacco and Matt Ryan. But when you look at like who makes Super Bowl championship games, who makes the championship game in Super Bowl, it's those guys. It's the first round guys, because Tom Brady's the massive outlier, and he's kind of put a wrench in all these numbers. But if you look at round 2 or later, guys that have made just Super Bowls, Jalen Hurts recently, Jimmy G, Nick Foles, Russell Wilson, Colin Kaepernick. That's it. Like the list is very, very small. So if
a couple of those were pretty high, it was like second round or third round.
Yeah, and Foles was back up to a first round to a second overall pick.
Yeah,
and that's kind of where he was. Jimmy G was trade. Hurts was kind of Hurts was in essence a backup until they gave him the starter role. But if you're going to get quarterbacks, you got to get them early, and you got to draft them high. And like even think about Lamar. Lamar's never been in a championship game.
Yeah,
and that's why I just think. And the thing with these guys, and I know I was on the call-in show, did the call-in show as well, because I've long thought that Anthony Richardson could potentially be the number 1 pick in this draft.
I felt like when Anthony Richardson is said on our YouTube channel that you get a notification to your phone and you have to go to work.
That or like the dog vent. And here's the thing. It wasn't necessarily about him as a player, because there's a lot of bust type potential with him, much like I think there is with Levis too. But it's one of those where, because especially in the AFC, especially if you're Houston at 2, you're Indianapolis at 4, you're Vegas at 7, like Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Herbert, Lawrence, Lamar, the AFC is a gauntlet, and you need the elite of elite guys. And these ones are, at least athletically, arm strength, athletic ability, all 4 of these guys sort of pass that test in a way.
So,
and I think that's why they go high.
I've been critical of Richardson and Levis, and someone that knows way more about all of this.
I think SEC fans in general, they'll be like, hey, why aren't you taking Hendon Hooker ahead of them?
Someone that knows way more about quarterbacks than I ever will told me, what you're seeing here is NFL teams see what Philadelphia did with Jalen Hurts, and they say, we can build an offense around that. We need someone that can be versatile, run game, pass game. We'll do the rest of it. As long as they can kind of hit the baseline marks, we'll put a system around that works. Get a good offensive line, some skill guys around them. You'll win a lot of football games. My only caveat to that, because I agreed with that point, neither Levis nor Richardson did anywhere near what Jalen Hurts did in college. Jalen Hurts was a really, 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 really good college football player.
Yes.
And I think the problem is,
especially his last year at Oklahoma,
you didn't see the consistency with Levis or Richardson to say, oh, that one wow play they just had, they can do that 15 times a game. I haven't seen that yet. And if some NFL team unlocks the key and makes it happen, fantastic. I didn't see Justin Herbert do that in one game at Oregon either. Like it happens that you just have to get in the right situation. And look, frankly, Herbert had his great, second year? Not quite as good since then. Like I think most people would feel better about Trevor Lawrence right now. And they should, because he's really, really good. So all to say, if there's a team that takes either Levis or Richardson over CJ Stroud, then you got problems.
So that one I wouldn't do, because to me Stroud's floor is way higher than both of those players.
Yeah,
and that's why to me he's QB2, and maybe potentially even QB1A.
Yeah.
Like, because whether or not Bryce Young is the outlier of all outliers. Because don't give me the 204 pounds that he's the similar size as Kyler Murray. There's no way on planet Earth that dude has been going to 5 guys 5 times a week for a month trying to get to that weight. Like,
And he ain't that fast anyway.
And he's not Kyler quick.
Yeah.
And Kyler struggled. And has he even won a playoff game? I don't know. I don't think so. And it's much like when you see with Tua, the issues with Tua. Tua's problem is not that he runs into contact. It's just that he's so slight that he gets hit on, shoved and hit the back of his head more so than anything else.
Well, and he doesn't, and maybe he'll get to this. One of the beauties of watching, and Russell Wilson's more built than this. I get that. But Russell Wilson never took a hard hit. No. Not in college, not in the pros. He was so smooth. And when it's time to get down, I'll get down. When it's time to go out of bounds, I'll go out of bounds. I'm going to avoid hits, and it's going to lengthen my career. And I get that he's bigger in stature than a Bryce Young is or than a Tua Tagovailoa is. But that's a skill that has to be mastered unless you're the size of Josh Allen, which I guess that doesn't matter as much though.
And I think Bryce is a unicorn in that aspect. Like his anticipation, his vision, all those things. Like in strength, the strength is underrated because he's strong as I'll get out. Like think back to last year in the SEC championship game when Trayvon just slid off of him. Number 1 pick Trayvon Walker just slid right off of him, had a sack in his grasp, and then he punched it to the sideline to Robinson. Like he's there from a strength perspective, but it's just, can you stay over the long haul? But I do think, like you said, I think taking Richardson and/or Levis over Stroud, I think is an issue because Stroud, because he's so accurate, his floor, and that's why I think you could see Indianapolis. If Indianapolis is the team that goes to 1, I think they could take Stroud because of they have the propensity to draft and care for bigger quarterbacks and that. But in the end, though, I still think that like this draft, and when we talked about on the augment, I saw this draft hype coming. I saw all of that because the highlights are the highest of highs. And now that in this league, you have to have you either have to have Hurts on a rookie deal who can run and become efficient throwing the ball, or you have to have the elite of elite guys. And that's athletically throwing, all that. And Burrow's kind of an interesting combination of all those things.
That's the first 4 quarterbacks off the board. We know Stetson Bennett's in the mix after that. Who else is he competing with there? Which quarterbacks could be taken ahead of him? What's his floor, I guess, in your opinion?
Floor, I think, is 5th round. I can't see 4th, 5th round. Once day 3 starts where teams have reset and they're like, hey, let's take this guy who we know is intelligent and can ball and is mobile as a backup. Like I've long said, I think he's going to be picked in the 3rd round by the Dolphins, like just as a far-fetched kind of, not necessarily far-fetched, but out there prediction. But I think in that Shanahan McVay system, much like what Brock Purdy had success-wise when he came into play, with the roster that they have, I think if you go put him in one of those places, he's going to succeed and at least be a viable backup.
I think
he's going to start games.
I think the Giants should be spiteful and just draft him because he had an embarrassing moment in Dallas, and so that would look good for a New York Giants person. That's what I think.
Hey, and Daniel Jones, and if you don't want to pay Daniel Jones $48 million or $45, whatever he's asking. But I will say one thing that I will always forever sort of, toot the horn a little bit is I got laughed at big time on the vent, not this year, but last year when he first started playing, about halfway through him playing, I said he will start an NFL game. I still think he's going to, like, too many quarterbacks play. Like Taylor Heineke started a playoff game.
His predecessor, Jake Fromm, started an NFL game.
Jake Fromm started a game. Yeah. Stetson's going to, if he wants to, and hang around and will do the work and all that, he's going to start an NFL game.
Notice the commonality with those top 4 picks, though. You got to be able to be mobile and scramble a little bit. You don't have to be like super speedster. You're not going to find Lamar Jackson's at quarterback. But in college, moving forward, unless you just have the perfect arm, like Matthew Stafford level, zoom, you better be able to extend plays, avoid sacks, help your offensive line, do all the little things. Joe Burrow is not some going to run you off the field 40 times, but he's just so good about getting where he needs to get to, extending
Savvy.
plays.
There's a draft word for you.
I mean, Daniel Jeremiah was rocking the draft words. Like he is, and he's in his prime of his career right now. All right,
very much is.
I'm taking the reins from you. What else you got before we wrap?
No, that's it. I think that's this weekend because of the buzz about QBs and specifically Richardson. I mean, he set 2 records for quarterbacks, vertical, and what was the 40 one of them? It was something. But the hype train is going to be there, and I do think his ability to avoid sacks and keep his eyes downfield in the pocket. When you add the things like you said with Hurts and the running game, the floor for him is maybe a little higher than people think.
Will Dan Mullen use this draft to get a job again?
I would hope not.
Right? Like, will he say, yeah, I got Anthony Richardson to Florida. He got his first crack with me, and now look what he's doing.
And I started him for the first. Was it the first start he ever had was against Georgia?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Didn't go well.
One of the greatest college defenses of all time, and then the Kobe Dean pick that will forever be remembered by Georgia fans.
I have a weird hypothetical for you to end the show, and it's actually not even draft related. But
okay.
Someone asked me this question.
I like it.
I haven't asked this to Coach Donnan yet, and I plan to on Tuesday. So I will compare notes here. Every year we hear someone that doesn't know a lot about football say, well, do you think the national championship winning college football team could beat the worst NFL team? And this year that would be, could Georgia beat the Texans?
The Bears technically had the first pick.
Technically, yeah, but I still think the Bears are better than the Texans. Regardless, pick whatever team you want. The answer is no. It's always going to be no. Forever no. It's a different level of athlete across the board. No. My question for you, could Georgia beat an XFL team? Right. That's the same reaction I had when that question was asked of me because I'm so used to dismissing it. But then I started thinking, well.
So one reason I would say yes is continuity. Like these guys, it's not like they practice a ton. I mean, they practice some, but you're getting sort of parts that are always not much consistency, basically, versus a team that understands and knows what it's doing. But still, yeah.
Now,
Josh Gordon is having some fun in the XFL, and he's a different level of dude.
There aren't many teams that I think are in this discussion. I think it's like 2 or 3. It's probably Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama.
And that's it.
Where you have some really good quarterback play and good lines of scrimmage. Because otherwise, I think it's still higher level of athlete across the board.
It's a good question, though.
Yeah. And it's one I'll kick to Coach Donnan, and he'll probably.
Hey, I do like their rules, at least. I like a lot of the rules they do.
One former Georgia player I want to give a shout out to because he was a bit of a combine freak too was Matt Landers.
100% correct. Yes.
Did not know he was that fast. I knew he was big and lanky. Did not know he was that fast.
I'll never forget. I had multiple conversations his last year at Georgia, and keep multiple people. Watch out for Matt Landers. Watch out for Matt Landers. And it's one of those things where the ability was always there. Yeah. He just needed to go get the confidence and the reps, and he did that. And he had a great season at Arkansas and went 4.39 in the 40. Like he's going to be picked somewhere and probably make a team.
See, he's one of those that I look at and I say, he did everything right. He had all the tools you could want for it. It feels like Anthony Richardson in those ways, but he didn't catch the damn ball at Georgia,
right?
Which is it's the first thing you have to do. The rest of it then is meaningless if you don't do that piece of it. He did much better at Arkansas. I'm really happy for him that worked out the way it did because I always heard good things about him. I heard his teammates loved him. He just didn't play well enough at Georgia to compete there, and that's only getting tougher and tougher and tougher. We'll have a show after the NFL draft, but there are some trends here with Georgia in the NFL draft that I think will be worth following. I think you'll have back-to-back seasons with Georgia having first-round tight end selections, which is unique.
Potentially 5 first-round picks again.
Potentially that. This year, you're going to have the second year in a row that Georgia most likely has defensive linemen selected in the top 5, which if you just think in the spectrum of Georgia, that is an outlier because from
Back to Stroud and
I mean, Seymour obviously
Seymour,
was up there.
those days.
Jonathan Sullivan got drafted. I think it was 2004 to the Saints. Had a short career, but that was a first-round pick. And that was pretty much it for like 15 years, 20 years if you're going back to the late 90s.
DP was sort of drafted as a linebacker.
Right. Yeah, they had him at outside linebacker at the time, which now he would be an edge. You know, it's just some of the positions and terminology have changed there. And Trayvon Walker, frankly, is viewed as an edge for the Jaguars. And you're not seeing him line up as much on the interior or even that kind of defensive tackle position that Georgia uses. All to say, I think you're seeing Georgia have defensive backs now drafted quite often. And I think Kamari Lassiter is going to be in that mix when his time comes too. Not first round necessarily, although who knows?
He has a great year. Yes, he's an NFL player. I know that.
You're starting to look around the league and say, oh man, there are really Georgia running backs everywhere. And some of them are like Elijah Holyfield hanging onto a scout team. Some are Nick Chubb. Some are Sony Michel, who's probably working maybe his last NFL jobs. But like, it looks like a new Georgia running back's coming in every year. I think Kendall Milton will be in that mix next year. So you just start to see the positions that like Georgia really is viewed as a team that is filling out these NFL rosters and for the most part having success with it. I'll be curious to see what happens with some of the former, like recent draft picks that are getting onto second contracts, like a Mecole Hardman. Does he hang out in KC? Do they pay him? Or do they, historically, it seems like what they do is we'll draft a fast guy later on a cheap contract and you have a good day, sir. Thank you for your service.
I think that is correct.
Yeah, that's probably why they stay on top because their money goes to Mahomes and then whoever he throws to. I mean, they let Tyreek Hill go. Let's put it that way.
That would be an interesting spot for Darnell Washington at pick number 31.
Darnell and Kelsey? What a formation.
I mean, there's a team that knows how to use tight ends.
Also, Kelsey's not long for this NFL world. He has a few years left, and he's a great career. That's a Hall of Famer. Now we're rambling, but this has been a great NFL draft talk. This is what we're going to do here for
thanks to those of you that have made it the whole way with us.
Yeah. If you have questions or stuff, like send us to us on Twitter because sometimes we pre-record this. Obviously, this is pre-recorded because if you're watching it live, I'm probably having this set for like noon on Monday, and it's obviously dark at my house. So either I'm halfway across the world or we just recorded this on Sunday night. So whatever. Brent, this was great. Thanks as always. I think you're wrong about Anthony Richardson, and I'll keep telling you that, and that's fine. And then the NFL probably proved me wrong.
He's worth the risk, especially if you're the Falcons. That's all I'm saying.
No, I disagree. Wait. Let me put my Saints hat on. Totally agree with you. That'd be a great pick forevermore. I think it would keep the Falcons in mediocrity forever. And so that's fine with me.
Hey, if he's an absolute bust, I mean, it's going to be one of those ones where it's like, Rollins, you idiot. I'm like, hey, I just told you it was going to happen, that the kid was going to be picked really, really high. Now, that's what I told. That in the end, that's what I've said, and I think that's going to end up being right.
Here's my counter argument with myself in this position: if you don't have the quarterback position right, you ought to draft it every year until you do. And so the Falcons have to look at it and say, "Is Desmond Ridder our future?" And the answer is no. I think everyone probably recognizes that. Fine player, he's not the next Mahomes, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow type. Not that. Sorry. All right. So it's worth it that if Anthony Richardson is the best available quarterback at that pick to do it. And then if you go through a year and you're like, I don't like the progress you're seeing, next year you draft another quarterback and you just keep going because your franchise is not going to be good until you get that right.
That's my main point with anything involving that position.
Yeah.
Is until you find the guy, you're still looking for the guy. And you still be trying to pick the guy because being in the middle is just ugh.
Now, there are certain scenarios where you end up with the David Carr scenario where the cast around them ruins their career because it's so shoddy. You've seen that a couple of times with different players. Like, I think if
Fields is in that territory potentially.
Yeah, Justin Fields is right there where he needs to get on another team to kind of revitalize what he's got going on.
Or the Bears invest money, and I think they will this offseason.
Yeah, but it's getting close to make or break time with that situation.
Mm-hmm.
The Saints, I think, are in that spot that if they threw a quarterback in that offense right now, I mean, Kamara's probably about to be out the door. They can't afford Michael Thomas, and they shouldn't pay him anyway. So then you're sitting there with an offensive line that's pretty average and Chris Olave. Okay, that's not going to be great. And so I could see the Saints just being like, yeah, we'll wait another year, and we'll just tank for it and try to get Sam Howell or
Drake May and Caleb Williams.
I said Sam Howell. I'm going a different UNC. Sorry.
It's late.
Oh, God. Don't go Sam Howell, please. No.
That's an interesting thing with teams that are high, and if they pass on QB, like if the Raiders pass on QB, if Carolina somehow passes on QB, like that almost in a way says, hey, we're either going to go Derek Carr, Tannehill, veteran guy, and try to win 8, 9, 10 games, or we're going into full, tank mode.
It was Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill and Andy Dalton for the Saints. So
see, those are serviceable. You'll win 7, 8 games, 6, 7, 8 games, and not be the first pick, not be the first or second pick.
Yeah, so you're saying you need to go worse than that? I
mean, that or somebody needs to come up with a weird injury to be like, sorry, bud, here's your check to go away.
I mean, I feel like Marcus Mariota is about to be the journeyman that just goes and hangs out with the team for a year and then moves on.
I don't know. Hey, he's got a Netflix. Is it Netflix or somebody documentary about him?
Mahomes and him and Kirk Cousins, right?
Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins will go somewhere too. And we'll see where Aaron Rodgers goes. Maybe the Packers have to move on to Jordan Love and realize he's not good.
And in the end, we just spent the last 4 minutes saying that quarterback really matters in the NFL and you should take chances. That's it.
And you should take receivers, though, that make them look good. Because I think that Joe Burrow is great. Joe Burrow is not as great if Jamar Chase is not there.
I agree.
That trio of receivers. Now we're rambling for sure. We're going to wrap this here. For Brent Rollins, I'm Dayne Young. This is Film Don't Lie without as much film, but a lot of numbers. And this was fun. More NFL draft talk coming, including some film breakdowns, not full-on breakdowns, but as we talk about this, we'll show you some things as we see them. We may even have an episode where Brent can show you what Anthony Richardson did good on the football field, and I will quickly show you what he did not do good on the football field, just so I can brand it